Hey friends, it's Mal. Welcome back to my channel if you're watching, and welcome back to the Witch Church podcast if you're listening. I thought it was about time to do a little Jupiter in Taurus spotlight video, and today is Thursday, May 18th. Jupiter just moved into Taurus less than 48 hours ago, and I'm thinking, I've been marinating a little bit with Jupiter in Taurus, and I just kind of meditated with this energy, and now I feel I'm ready to kind of speak to it a little bit more. And sometimes before a planet ingresses into a new sign, I don't quite know how I feel about it. And I kind of need the planet to actually be in the sign to sort of meet and greet and introduce myself to this planet and this new sign. So that's kind of what I've been doing the past 48 hours, and I'm excited to kind of share some of the things I've been kind of marinating with when it comes to Jupiter in Taurus. So let's, because Jupiter takes about a year to get through one sign, so Jupiter will have this planet in Taurus from May 2023 all the way up to May 2024. So we have about a year to really tune in to what Jupiter in Taurus is bringing to us. I think we have to be careful when it comes to the rhetoric, when it comes to Jupiter transits, because you'll see a lot of astrology content saying things about Jupiter, just in general, like Jupiter being the luckiest planet and the planet of abundance and the planet of expansion and good things and good luck and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying any of that is inherently untrue, because Jupiter is a benefic planet, meaning it is a bringer of good things typically. But at the same time, we have to take into account the context of the sky that Jupiter is operating within. And something I find interesting is later in this Jupiter in Taurus transit, Jupiter in Taurus will come in contact with Venus retrograde in Leo. And that starts, Venus will be in Leo early June, will station retrograde at the end of July. So, and be squaring Jupiter in Taurus, sort of all the way through. So this is really interesting to me. It feels like Jupiter in Taurus and Venus retrograde in Leo are inherently connected. And that would also mean that this summer, or actually kind of starting right now, but especially once Venus moves into Leo, there's a new story that is beginning to develop in both our Taurus house and our Leo house in our chart. And this story is one of tension, but also potentially overcoming certain obstacles that have held us back. And in this video, I'll be kind of mulling over how to actually examine Jupiter and Venus, the two benefic planets, the two planets that are supposedly the bringer of good things, right? Jupiter and Venus squaring each other in a tension-filled aspect with each other. What is that going to mean for our overall Jupiter in Taurus transit? So let's examine that a little bit. And then towards the sort of 2/3 into the video, we'll do some rising sign forecasts. And I have a very love-hate relationship with doing rising sign forecasts. I love tuning in to each rising sign and what could be experienced with this transit, but also about 6 or 7 signs in, I start to get a little bit tired and I start to think, what have I done? So if you do enjoy my rising sign forecast, please hype me up in the comments of this YouTube video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. My goal is to get to 1,000 followers or subscribers by the end of 2023 on YouTube. And that would really help me out because that means I could potentially monetize my astrology content on YouTube, which would be helpful to me, okay? So thank you so much for your help, your comments, your likes, your subscribes. If you didn't know who I am, hey, I'm Mal. I'm a Hellenistic astrologer who lives in the Chicagoland area. If you're interested in booking a session, I would say most of my sessions are virtual via Zoom. You can go to my website, check out my menu of astrological services. I'm also a tarot reader, and if this video/podcast reaches you in time, I just wanted to give a brief reminder that my tarot class, Tarot for Personal Transformation, begins May 23rd. So that's a Tuesday evening. It's over Zoom. You can join from anywhere. So if you happen to just be finding this video or just be listening to this podcast and you want to hop into the class, there's still time. Also, if you are in the Chicagoland area, I'll be at Sat Nam Yoga Studio on Friday, May 26th, doing a Jupiter in Taurus workshop. So that's going to be super exciting. And yeah, so if you want kind of an in-person Chicago astrologers meetup, and yeah, you happen to be in town and you want to join, I'll have the link to the Sat Nam sign up in my show notes as well, okay? And I do have a puppy as a roommate, so we might hear some barking in the background. We're gonna let it fly, guys. This puppy was born last November. She's a Scorpio, and she was born during the Mars retrograde in Gemini, so she's a little kooky. Don't tell her I said that, but she's a kook. Can't really even imagine the literal the humans born during that time, right? But anyways, just kidding. So let's get into Jupiter in Taurus. And like I was saying, Jupiter transits, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we go into a Jupiter transit and we just inherently think this is going to be the bringer of all good things, right? Because I think Jupiter often reminds us that good things have a price. Too much of a good thing may actually turn out to be a bad thing. And also, it kind of, it can be a planet that leads to sort of over exuberance or overdoing things. So I'm thinking that in Taurus, Jupiter is being housed by Venus. Why is that? Well, because Venus is the ruler of Taurus. And what does Venus like to do? Venus likes to host a dinner party and eat beautiful food and drink delicious wine and wear extravagant clothes and be in harmony with many different people. Venus likes to, make out with their crush. Venus likes to have a fun time. Venus likes when the whole room is comfortable, when the whole room is experiencing pleasure and relaxation. Like that's the highest expression of what Venus could want, right? So it's almost like this Dionysus kind of influence there. Now Jupiter, the planet of expansion, the planet of experience, okay? The planet of abundance, just in general, Jupiter makes things bigger. Think about the physical makeup of this planet. Jupiter is like literally 150 times bigger than Earth, right? It's the biggest planet. It's a gas giant, right? It has a million different moons. It's not a million, but you get what I'm saying. Like, the moons that revolve around it. I mean, it's a lot. It takes up a lot of space, right? So think, this planet just checked into the hotel of Venus, right? So it's a little bit, it's giving Jay Gatsby's party. It's like, okay, we're at Great Gatsby's party. you know, or we're at like a party being thrown by like a real housewife, you know, who's trying to outdo the other real housewives, right? Like that's the kind of place that Jupiter just checked into. And I think that's important to note because, again, we tend to really paint this very optimistic picture of Jupiter, which is inherently a Jupiterian thing, to be optimistic. Yet, again, Jupiter in Venus's sign, and then later squaring Venus this summer. You know, that's some overdoing it energy, right? That's a little too much of a good thing that could be coming through. So I think this Jupiter in Taurus transit is inherently probing us to think, how do I manage a lot of a good thing, you know, or what do I do with like pleasure and money and success and achievement, and how do I spiritually and philosophically think about these good things in a way that it's almost like in a way that doesn't necessarily allow my ego from like completely grabbing on to like this gilded golden carriage that is opening up for me. Like, how do I remember my spiritual sense and my spiritual studies within some of these like more exuberant things that are in the Venusian hotel, right? That Jupiter just checked into. Okay. And I recently got this book at a bookstore when I was with my friend, my astrologer friend, Jeanette. Shout out to Jeanette if you're watching. But we recently went to a bookstore together in Chicago. What the hell is it called? If you know Chicago, it's Myopic Books. So it's a pretty famous bookstore in Wicker Park. And we went in there and I saw this book, and it's called An Astrological Guide to Self-Awareness, written by Donna Cunningham. And if you've heard me talk about my favorite astrology books, you may have heard me refer to Healing Pluto Problems by Donna Cunningham, which is one of my favorite more psychological astrology books, right? And I have a lot of Pluto problems. So I think that book has really helped me. And I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I don't have a second Donna Cunningham book. And I'm not kidding, like the first thing I flipped to was this little snippet here. It reads, Jupiter and Saturn, co-rulers of luck and success. And I just want y'all to listen to this really quick, because I think she's getting at something here. So she says, I've been a fairly lucky person all my life. And once after a run of especially good luck, I set about analyzing it. I felt that by understanding my luck, I could not only increase it for myself, but also teach my unconscious methods to others who wouldn't have been so fortunate. It's kind of giving white privilege, but just go along with it. Naturally, I thought a great deal about Jupiter, the planet traditionally associated with good luck, but I was quite surprised to discover Saturn has much or more to do with luck than Jupiter. Saturn, I know it is the greater malefic and the grim reaper, and it's supposed to bring on all kinds of misfortune. If you really get into it though, Saturn doesn't bring anything onto you that you haven't already brought onto yourself. I don't agree, but again, let's keep going. And if what you've done is lay the foundations for good luck, then Saturn will bring you better and longer lasting luck than you ever had under Jupiter. Okay, so again, like there's things I don't agree with that paragraph, and it's written through this lens of sort of kind of like a late 20th century modern psychological astrologer who's like poo-pooing Hellenistic technique and sort of making fun of the Hellenistic astrologers who are like, Saturn is bad. Saturn can bring about bad things. And, some of the psychological astrologers like to be like, oh, you only bring upon the bad things if you're not doing your shit, and sometimes that's just not true. I have a friend who, their parent died during their Saturn return. And like, what do you do with that? So when a client comes to your session, are you going to say, oh yeah, Saturn return, your parent died, guess that was your fault? Like, no, that's dumb. So anyways, now I'm on a tangent with sometimes the things that I find a little toxic about that modern psychological astrology that just sometimes refuses to see that like bad things do happen, and sometimes those bad things like aren't our fault. I do like the root of what Donna Cunningham's saying though, which is that Saturn has something to do with building foundations and being disciplined and sort of laying the groundwork for being prepared for good things to come through. Whereas Jupiter sometimes just expects the good things to come. And sometimes that works for Jupiter. But other times, it's actually Saturn that helps us prepare for things that are sort of flowing to us, right? And now listen to this. This is another chapter here. She says Jupiter, the overrated benefic. And this is a little bit along the lines of what I was saying earlier with Jupiter being related to overdoing it. So we're going to find out that Jupiter often means overdoing things, overeating, overdrinking, generally overindulging. Jupiter itself in astrology is overdone. We overrate its helpfulness and overestimate how much it's going to do for us when it transits our charts. Yeah, I do agree with that, though. I do agree with it. We will even find out in this chapter that Saturn has as much to do with luck and success as Jupiter does. Blah, 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 blah. And that goes into that other passage I read. But, okay, you see what I'm getting at here. Like, there's a shadow side to every Jupiter transit. We can't just say, like, oh, this is going to be the best thing ever, when there definitely is a shadow side to Jupiter transits, right? And, diving a little bit more deeply into Jupiter in Taurus, there's sort of a karmic story with Taurus about holding on to the material world. If you are familiar with the tarot, it reminds me of the Four of Pentacles. That's very much a shadow Taurian energy. Also, like Scrooge was a Taurus. I don't actually know if he was a Taurus, but it's a very like shadow side Taurus energy, like holding on, like sort of being like sort of a penny pincher in all senses, not just monetarily, but like energetically holding on. And again, this isn't me throwing you under the bus. If you're a Taurus, that's not what I'm saying. I'm more speaking to the karmic understanding of what Taurus may struggle with. And Jupiter may exacerbate some of these Taurian struggles when it comes to, let's say, like hoarding wealth, or really gripping on to our success, or like there's this shadow side with like, oh, a big success does happen, but now I'm like terrified and I'm up at night that it's all going to be taken away. And Taurus being a sign that's related to security and both monetary security, but just like also feeling safe in our bodies and feeling safe in our life. That inherently brings up the other end of the spectrum, which is how we can feel unsafe, and how when we're chasing after a feeling of safety, especially monetary safety, That it's sort of like that capitalistic hamster wheel where we never reach enough, right? We never reach exactly the amount that would allow us to feel safe, although we're all on this hamster wheel trying to reach this amount. But even once we reach a goal amount or whatever, it's like there's always more. There's always this next goal or level. That's a theme that I think Taurus can kind of sort of trigger us with. Another thing that I think about with Taurus is guilt. And guilt when it comes to doing the things that we enjoy. And something that this Jupiter in Taurus transit may bring up is our relationship to the things that give us pleasure. And or just the things that make us feel relaxed, make us feel safe, let us have fun, you know. And I'm thinking about how, like, 2 minutes, always 2 minutes before I go to take a nap, I'm always like, have this like overwhelming guilt that like I shouldn't be doing that because of many different factors. I mean, both my parents have a workaholic relationship with work. I was raised in a family system where like rest was shamed to a really deep degree. Also, I was raised in a society where rest is shamed, you know, so that sort of guilt or shame that I feel when I'm about to take a nap, that isn't necessarily my own. It's not necessarily a signal that I should not be doing what I need to be doing. It's more of a signal that I have been taught that this is wrong, when this really isn't wrong at all, right? And that's something that Jupiter and Taurus could actually help us when it comes to healing. Relationship with pleasure, relationship with food, relationship with sleep, relationship with feeling joy, having fun, even doing nice things for ourselves. We talk about exuberance, and I called Taurus a penny pincher. But on the other side too, you know, there has to be the mirror of the spectrum. Taurus can also be like big spending energy too. Like I'm overdoing it on my budget, or I'm overspending on this. And I think when we do things that are out of alignment for our goals, sometimes guilt or anxiety does sort of bubble up. And maybe that guilt or anxiety that bubbles up is actually a signal that, oh, this isn't quite in alignment with where you want to be going. And that's very different than the guilt or shame that bubbles up inside of me when I'm about to take a nap, right? So I think part of this Jupiter and Taurus transit is kind of figuring out what is actually guilt that's coming from like toxic conditioning, and what is actually a feeling of anxiety that's due to the fact that we're about to overdo something or overindulge, or just like overspend or whatever it may be, to a point where it might even be harmful for us, right? Like, because if we're in $30,000 of credit card debt and like we're about to like buy $300 worth of like mugs at Target, and we have that like feeling of guilt as we're about to do that, like that, you know, that could be on to like, you know, that anxiety could be leading us somewhere that is pointing us in a direction of how to live more honestly. And that brings me back to The Great Gatsby, right? Because Jay Gatsby isn't living honestly. You know, he's making these big parties and trying to impress all these people, but it's coming from a place of insecurity, right? And that feels like a Jupiter and Taurus thing as well. So that's kind of my little like overview of Jupiter in Taurus. Some of the themes that could come up, both the really beautiful healing themes and the shadow themes. When it comes to finding pleasure and joy and like enjoying our lives and maybe healing our relationship to enjoyment, it's my feeling that, and I don't mean to sound like hippy dippy trippy with this piece, but I have found that like the only thing that brings me the truest peace of mind, the truest clarity of thought, like the truest love and harmony with the universe is relationship with nature. And those moments where I can just like focus in on like a drop of rain on a leaf, you know, or like how beautiful a flower really is, and like how absolutely mind-blowing it is that, you know, Earth somehow creates that flower and that color, and that color comes from nature. I mean, like those little moments that only come in maybe 30 seconds a day, right? If you're lucky. You know, that's the pleasure that I think Jupiter and Taurus can really lead us towards. But we may mistake like this sort of Jupiter and Taurus energy for like, okay, what kind of fun or what kind of pleasure can money buy? You know, or like what kind of comfort can I seek in the material world, or even like what can I engage in, whether it's like overindulging with like food or drink, or even like sex. And that's not me like food shaming anybody. It's just like the reality of Jupiter in Taurus is that we may be trying to find that sort of universal happiness, connection, joy within those material pleasures. And truly I think really the only thing that can actually give us that may be our connection with nature and the natural world, which is very Taurian, right? Because a higher frequency of Taurus definitely teaches us about our relationship to like the dirt and like the plants and the flowers and the bees and all of that. That's why Taurus people usually have some kind of green thumb. All right, that's done getting with Jupiter in Taurus right off the bat. Now keep in mind, like I said in the beginning, eventually Venus will move into Leo and square Jupiter and Taurus, and this will happen 3 times. So I want to give you those dates, the dates that Jupiter and Venus will square each other, because these dates are connected to the story that is developing in your Taurus house and Leo house. And we'll get into that story when I do the rising sign forecasts, okay? But pay attention to the story that starts to develop in early June. Specifically, June 11th, we have the first square from Venus to Jupiter. Then Venus will station retrograde on July 23rd and square Jupiter again on August 22nd. And then for a 3rd time on September 17th. Okay, and then rewind a little bit, because Venus, will station retrograde July 23rd, station direct September 3rd. And just a day after, less than 24 hours after Venus stations direct, Jupiter stations retrograde on September 4th. So again, June 11th, August 22nd, September 17th, those are our Venus Jupiter squares from our Taurus house to our Leo house. July 23rd, Venus stations retrograde. September 3rd, Venus stations direct. September 4th, Jupiter stations retrograde, right? So there's like this story this summer that has to do with Venus and Jupiter squaring each other. And that's what I want to dive into next. Like, what could this square actually mean? And we're going to dive into that within the rising signs. But one thing I just want to say in general, you know, Venus in retrograde in Leo, you can see how this is very much connected to some of the themes that I just brought up with Jupiter in Taurus, like our experience with pleasure, our experience with feeling safe, and on the flip side, guilt, with our feeling of guilt when it comes to experiencing the things that bring us joy, and our inherent feeling of like, do we deserve this, right? Or is this, am I worthy of this? That also echoes some Venusian lessons, because Venus in Leo, I think, is very much going to bring up our relationship with our own talents and our own beauty and our own ability to show our talents to the world, right? And that's not necessarily me. So often we sort of jump to the theatrical examples when we're talking about Leo. We're like, oh, Leo loves to be on stage. Leo loves to be seen. Leo likes to be appreciated and for what they're good at. And that might not have anything to do with theater. And there's something here about Venus in Leo helping us examine, what is my relationship to what I'm good at? You know, and like, have I been properly nurturing that? And have I been doing justice to my talents? Or have I been going more the Jupiter and Taurus route, and have I just been feeling like I'm on this hamster wheel of like achieving success after success after success, but it's not actually the success that my soul and my heart truly want? And maybe Venus and Leo kind of helps us define our own terms of success, if that makes any sense. Okay. But again, it'll be different for each rising sign. And now I've been blabbing for over a half an hour on the sort of overview or the forecast, but hopefully y'all like these longer videos, longer forecasts, and let's take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back with the rising sign forecasts. All right, guys, we're back with the rising sign forecast, and let's start off with Taurus Rising, since y'all are about to have Jupiter transit your first house of the body, of the physical appearance, and also the first house has to do with our dharma and how we walk our path, and how we make choices that sort of lead to changes even when it comes to our path. And Taurus Rising, I have a story for you, and it has to do with my dad, who's a Taurus Rising. And it's relevant because my dad is, you know, such a good guy, very hardworking person, and some would say workaholic vibes, right? And I would say the majority of his focus is on work. And it's funny because I was home the other day and he put down this magazine in front of me, and it was like an editorial on Scotland. And he was like, Mal, like, when we take my retirement trip, we should do this. Like, do you think we could go to Scotland? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I mean, I love Scotland. I was like, yeah, I'd go to Scotland anytime. And he's starting to, if you knew my dad, that was very unlike him, you know, to allude to adventure, you know, because as a Taurus Rising, you know, he's so sort of in his schedule, in his ways, in his routine, that for him to like allude to a bigger change and a bigger adventure that's maybe coming in the next couple years with his retirement. He wants to go on a trip, which I'll go with him on. That was big. Like, that was like, wow, okay, like he's getting excited for a new adventure, and that could kind of be something that really benefits the Taurus risings, especially if you've been feeling as a Taurus rising. I mean, since 2018 y'all have had Uranus in the first house, and that can be very destabilizing change to the self. And some of these changes you've had to deal with haven't been comfortable in the last couple years. And Jupiter coming into the first house, it's like, ooh, but like, how could I now have a better relationship with change? And how could I have a better relationship with adventure? And also, like, what have I been so stuck in my ways about, like my routine, or like my what I have to do list? And how could I loosen that up a little bit and invite a little bit more adventure in and some experimentation in, which is very Jupiter in Taurus. Another person who is sort of a client, they were telling me that they're looking to get pregnant in the near future, and they're a Taurus rising. And I thought that sort of suited them in a way, because Jupiter tends to expand things, and the first house is the body. So it's sort of like that expansion of the body, which comes from pregnancy, which is an interesting thing. I'm not saying all Taurus risings will get pregnant, but that sort of body getting bigger, whether that's through like muscle mass, or maybe just energetically you're showing up in a bigger way, that could be very Taurus rising during this next year. And keep in mind now, there's going to be a square with the Venus retrograde later this summer in your fourth house of the home, the parents, the ancestry, and also our roots. So we see this sort of tension building between like, where am I rooted and where is my home? And then Jupiter giving you this sense of adventure to expand and explore the self. Maybe some Taurus risings will surprise themselves and say, hey, I'm going to move somewhere else, or I'm going to travel somewhere else for the summer and, lease my apartment for the summer and just leave, which is not like Taurus risings typically, but there could be some surprises there in store this summer. Also, for the Taurus risings who want to change their home, that could be coming in with the Venus retrograde. Like, I'm talking like interior design and sort of those house upkeeping sort of things. Like, I'm going to paint the door, I'm going to paint the house, or I'm going to clean out this, or, I'm finally going to get rid of some of my grandmother's things that are causing clutter. Like, that kind of thing could kind of come up, and you never know what getting rid of clutter could actually do for your energy. And if you do want something new and abundant to come in to your life, this is regardless of your rising sign, like, clean your house, give away shit that you don't use anymore, and just energetically feel that shift, and you'll create some new energetic space for things to come in. So this will be interesting for you, Taurus rising. And then we have Gemini rising coming after Taurus rising. And this is interesting because we have Jupiter entering the 12th house for Gemini risings. The 12th house is sort of like this Jungian, Freudian house of the subconscious. And when we have transits through the 12th house, sometimes we are met with a circumstance that brings more awareness, gifts us awareness to our inner selves, a part of us that we have sort of repressed, or a fear that we couldn't name up until this point, or a part of our inner child that we've never quite met before. We finally get to meet them. So it's sort of like a meeting of a fear, or a meeting of a subconscious narrative that may not necessarily be true. And remember, in the beginning of the video, I was talking about guilt. And I think this is especially pertinent for the Gemini risings, because you may be getting met with certain things that have previously filled you with shame or filled you with guilt. Maybe it's like relationship with sex, or relationship with food, or relationship to yourself and your own body, your own gender, your own sexuality. And like Jupiter in Taurus is coming into the 12th house and kind of saying like, hey, like it's time to release some of this guilt. It's time to work through some of this shame. And it might be time to sort of not keep this in the dark anymore, because keeping this in the dark isn't doing anybody any favors. And in fact, this might be sort of this piece of shame or this piece of guilt may be holding you back from your highest expression in some way, right? And we look at this square to the 3rd house, Leo 3rd house, and Venus will be retrograde in the 3rd house. So this is really like a rewriting of the story, both literally and metaphorically. Like, I think this summer, Gemini Rising is really rewriting the story of who they are, their worthiness, how they value themselves. The 3rd house has to do with our narratives that we hold about certain situations. And there's something maybe changing, or there's some challenge that's coming in through the 3rd house that might have to do with like the culture that we grew up in, like our neighborhood culture, or our sort of the attitudes that were brought into our lives by like our neighbors, our teachers, our family. Think of the culture you grew up in. And there's something that you're doing this summer that might be challenging that. And we might not think a lot about culture when it comes to the neighborhood we grew up in, because when we use the word culture, we usually think of something that's like very foreign to us, right? But think about the culture that you were raised in and its impression on you and your psyche, and how that has influenced you to this day and influenced the narratives that you have about your life. Okay. And that could be really changing and evolving in a beneficial way this summer. Okay, Cancer Rising, we have Jupiter moving into the 11th house, groups, networks, friendships. So there's going to be maybe even an overwhelming amount of networking opportunities that may come in, especially this summer. You may be feeling a little bit socially overwhelmed, feeling like there's a lot of opportunities to pick and choose from. And this kind of relates to the Venus retrograde that's going to be going through the 2nd house of finances and the 2nd house of resources. I think that's the key to this Jupiter-Venus square. You're figuring out like what networks and connections are actually worth my while and which are not aligned with my values. It's interesting. I've already felt this come in like 2 days. I'm a Cancer Rising, by the way. And, I work a couple different part-time jobs, one night a week at Whole Foods. And the other day, yesterday I was working last night, and this lady came through my line and she was like, oh, hey, yeah, like I know you. We met that one time and we traded business cards. And I was like, oh yeah. And I had to kind of like rack my memory, but maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I met this lady at Whole Foods and we started talking somehow. I was like cleaning something and we started talking and we figured out we were both energy workers. and we traded business cards, and she came through my line. I was working as a cashier last night, and she recognized me again, and she was like, oh yeah, you should come to the grand opening of this thing, this like sort of spiritual shop community space thing. And I was like, oh yeah. And I was just like, automatically I was like, oh my god, this is Jupiter in my 11th house. Like, you're gonna be, Cancer risings are gonna be getting a lot of invites, like a lot of networking opportunities, and we're just deciding like which ones are worth our while, like I said, which ones are aligned with our value system, maybe even which ones are gonna make us the most money. With the Venus retrograde in the second house of finances, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a lack of financial growth this summer or a lack of financial resources. I think what it is more alluding to is like relationship with the resources that you have already and relationship to how you organize those resources, okay? But I will say there is some sort of caveat here with a second house, 11th house square. I think we have to be careful as Cancer risings with the investments we're making in certain community spaces. Like I could see, let's say a Cancer rising is a yoga teacher, okay? And they decide to spend like $1,000 renting out this like huge yoga studio space, and like they want like 100 people to be there, and let's say 20 people show up. So that investment was maybe a bit overzealous, which again is a Jupiter Taurus thing. Like you're overdoing it, it's like you're over projecting what the outcome is going to be, and then thus losing money because of that. So maybe play some of the thing. I'm not saying play it small, Cancer rising, but sort of choose a more humble route and be surprised versus being overzealous with, you know, your projection of the outcome and then being disappointed. That advice could maybe even flow over to everybody with Jupiter and Taurus, right? All right, so Leo rising, you're about to have, you just had Jupiter move into the 10th house of career. And, you know, just 2 days ago, guys, this is what I do. I keep track of everybody who's talking, everybody who's delivering me news. I categorize it in my head, in my file folder inside my mind of what's happening, and then in order to share it with you guys. But Leo rising that I know, that's my friend, just texted me 2 nights ago and was like, I just got promoted at work. You know, I'm like, all right, there it is. Jupiter in Taurus in the 10th house. So a lot of Leo risings are going to be sort of in the position of maybe being promoted at work, graduating to the next step when it comes to their work life. For my other Leo rising friend, her boss and potentially the assistant to the boss at her workplace both are leaving. So this is going to present her with the opportunity to potentially take on more responsibility in the workplace and sort of learn more as a leader, right? So that could be a manifestation of the 10th house Jupiter and Taurus stuff. And then it's squaring the Venus retrograde in Leo in your first house. So this is a lot about self-perception versus public perception, because everybody in your workplace could perceive you and be completely correct about you being a great leader and being really capable of leading the team and leading the project and doing a great job with this or that. But if you don't perceive yourself as capable, then you can't grow. So there's this big reckoning, I think, especially with the Leo risings, about like self-confidence. And you wouldn't think, you know, in the cliche of Leo, like, oh my God, they're so confident, they're so cocky. Not necessarily. You know, just because you have Leo placements doesn't mean you have this like inflated sense of self-confidence all the time, right? So there's something here about really working on self-perception. Is it accurate? You know, and can you give yourself more credit for how you've grown? That feels like the lesson here for Leo Rising. Now, Virgo Rising. Jupiter in Taurus just moved into the 9th house. And I'm racking my brain about who I know as a Taurus, who I know is a Virgo Rising, so I can kind of apply it here. But while I'm thinking the Virgo Risings, the fact that Jupiter just moved into the 9th house, what is the 9th house? It's travel, it's experiences, it's learning through, sort of gaining wisdom through spiritual studies. It could literally be going back to school, which will be applicable for some Virgo Risings, but this is giving more of a spiritual sort of collecting of wisdom sort of moment. Maybe you're traveling somewhere that feels very spiritually attuned to who you are. Maybe you're having the opportunity more often to go to a place that makes you feel really good, really connected to your own intuition. If you do have the monetary, you know, ability to take a trip somewhere that feels really spiritually enlightening to you, I would do it, Virgo Rising. Especially too, because there's that square from Venus retrograde going from the 12th house. And again, the 12th house, subconscious fears. The 12th house is also the house of retreat. So you may be finding that, especially this summer, it's a time to find meaningful alone time. It's a time to really clear your aura from the energies of the outside world and come back to you and your truth. And it's a time to really maybe develop and work on self-trust that comes through kind of strongly. Like, why haven't you been trusting yourself as much as you should? And what are the pieces of our conditioning that teach us not to trust ourselves and to ask others or to look towards societal judgments in order to make our decisions, right? And that's not what this time is about at all. It's really about like communing with your spirit guides and your ancestors about what the next step is and what is truly aligned for you and your soul. Okay, so that's Virgo Rising. Libra Rising, Jupiter just moved into the 8th house. Okay, so the 8th house, it's a house of shared resources, other people's stuff. So some Libra Risings, like your spouse just got a raise. Your spouse is going through a big moment of growth. You just found out that your long lost uncle died and left you a huge inheritance. You know, like that could be the case for like one Libra Rising, right? But overall, I think this is a time where you are really benefiting from other people's successes. And it's a good time to be a Libra and to to be a Libra Rising and to work with the connections that you have in order to bring yourself abundance. This isn't necessarily me saying like, ooh, be friends with that person with the private plane or the yacht, you know, in order to get invited to their summer yacht party, or I don't know, like that's like a very overzealous example. But like, you know, look, if you're stuck, look for the things and the people that you're already connected to, because they may be more than willing to help you through this moment, right? Like if you're traveling, call up your friend who lives in that city. They're probably going to be like, oh yeah, stay in my basement or whatever, and you know, save money on that hotel. ask for help and you shall receive. That feels to me very much the Jupiter in the 8th house. Now it is squaring the 11th house of groups and connections, especially once Venus gets there, right? Because Venus is going to move into Leo and eventually station retrograde in Leo and make that square to your 8th house. So there could be a little bit of a reckoning at the same time with the groups, networks, friendships that you do have, which ones are actually really aligned, which aren't. If there were any, sometimes retrogrades bring up things from the past. So if there's any unfinished business when it comes to a certain group or a certain friendship situation that maybe you had a falling out in the past year or two, that might come up again. And, there might be an opportunity for healing. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's a complete reconciliation, but healing in the sense of there might be an opportunity to resolve karma. And that is something that one of my teachers, Adam Ellenboss, taught me about the 8th house. The 8th house in its best sort of signification is a resolution of karma, is sort of a forgiveness and a letting go. And I think that could really be applicable here for the 8th house, 11th house stuff for the Libra rising. Okay. Scorpio rising, we've got Jupiter moving into the 7th house of relationships. And again, who's a Scorpio rising? Taylor Swift. And why has she been in the news lately? Because her and her boyfriend of like 6 or 7 years, Joe Alwyn, have broken up. And now she's rumored to be dating this other dude now. And I think that's interesting to see that happen as Jupiter moves into her 7th house of relationships. It shows that Jupiter, in order to expand things, might beckon us to let something go, or might beckon us to sort of reassess the sort of security that is brought to us through relationships, and whether or not that security is the only thing that's keeping us there, right? And like, out of all her boyfriends, I feel like Joe Alwyn was like very like kind of even keeled and sort of felt like more stable, but he had that Taurian sort of effect. I don't know if he's actually a Taurus or not, but the relationship felt very Taurian, right? In the sense that it wasn't like up and down and up and down. It felt like it had a speed. And but is that too boring for Taylor, or like is that does that sense of security lose out to a sense of like romance and excitement that maybe she's really seeking? So there could be kind of a push and pull between that as Jupiter moves through your 7th house of relationships, Scorpio rising. Like, oh, this person gives me security, but I feel like they're boring and they don't bring me pleasure. Or like, oh, this person brings me so much pleasure, but also they give me no security, and like it feels very up and down and triggering and blah, 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 blah. So you kind of get where I'm going here. And with that square from the 7th house to the 10th house, because the 10th house is Leo, and that's where the Venus retrograde in Leo will be taking place, we also have some maybe potential career shifts coming in for the Scorpio risings. Like, is this career really right for me? Is there something to be let go of in the realm of career? Is there something that I could be shifting when it comes to how I'm showing up publicly? And anytime we have like a career shift, I think it inherently affects our relationship dynamics. So that's kind of the connection there between that Jupiter and that Venus square from the 7th to the 10th house for the Scorpio risings. Sagittarius rising, Jupiter just moved into the 6th house of work, everyday life. Just the other day, a Sagittarius Rising told me they have a third job interview for this position. So again, kind of similar to the Leo Risings. Sagittarius Risings could also be sort of expanding at work, getting new jobs right now, getting hired, getting promoted, taking on more responsibility at work. And there's something too that maybe is coming through for the Sagittarius Risings. Maybe life is becoming more health, mindfulness centered, because Taurus reminds me of things like body work and acupuncture and massage and energy work and Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine. So there's this thing here in the sixth house that's happening. Maybe the Sagittarius Rising is becoming more in tune with those holistic ways of healing. And I think this very much relates to the square from the ninth house, because Venus retrograde will be going through the ninth house of spirituality, belief system, our relationship to God, our relationship to our own spiritual life, right? So I think there's this kind of mental psycho-spiritual shift that kind of comes through here for the Sagittarius Rising, how to be healthy in a spiritual sense, not just a physical sense, but what is health in a mental spiritual sense, and can we make space for that in our lives? That feels like the question for the Sagittarius Risings, okay? Capricorn Rising, we have Jupiter in Taurus moving into the fifth house. So the fifth house can be fertility, children, pregnancy. So Capricorn Risings could see that being a theme in some way in their lives. If any Capricorn Risings have felt that there's been an issue with fertility or something along those lines in the past couple years, I think this, not to give any false hope, but I think this might be helpful to have this influence there in the fifth house. For the Capricorn Risings who aren't necessarily looking to procreate, the fifth house very much has to do with fun and pleasure and romance. This is a little hot girl summer moment for the Capricorn Risings. Maybe some Capricorn Risings actually don't want to be held down this summer in a committed sense. Maybe they just want to be following the sort of following the sort of call of joy and pleasure and doing what they want. And this especially feels like it relates to the square in the eighth house, which is where that Venus retrograde in Leo will be later this summer. So it's what's ending, or what ties with people feel too stifling, or what relationships feel like they're actually keeping me from enjoying my life, and is that really what a relationship is about? Or do I just want to find pleasure and date myself for a while? That feels very Capricorn Rising. Now, for the Capricorn Risings who do really love their partner, and let's say you are partnered, you're not looking to break up or anything, there could also be a sexual healing thing coming in the fifth house with that Jupiter in Taurus there. I think the shadow side for the Capricorn Risings, especially the fifth house stuff, can be related to gambling and drinking and partying and just sort of that too much fun kind of vibe. So make sure you're sort of examining your relationship with fun. I think that would be the guidance here, Capricorn Rising. Now, Aquarius Rising, Jupiter in Taurus has moved into your fourth house of the home. So perhaps some Aquarius Risings are moving, seeking their aligned home, maybe starting a big renovation process inside of the house. maybe they're selling their house, you know, like there could be just an examination overall of like, do I want to live here? It's funny, one of my Aquarius Rising clients, I don't think she'd mind me sharing this, she actually told me the other day, she's like, I actually hate being a homeowner. And I'm like, oh, that's so Jupiter moving into your fourth house. I hate being a homeowner. I'm going to sell my house and become a renter again. You know, like I want to have more freedom, more autonomy over my living situation. That could be some Aquarius risings. And with that square from Venus retrograde, which is soon going to be moving through the seventh house of relationships, this could be related to like your partner or your dating life or sort of like love manifestation stuff. Like maybe some Aquarius risings are choosing to move to the big city because the dating in their small town sucks and they really do desire a partner, and maybe they want this move to generate more of an environment to meet someone, you know. I think some Aquarius risings could be having a conflict with their spouse or with their domestic partner when it comes to like what color are we painting the kitchen during our renovation, or maybe your partner this summer starts to go through something really challenging and it becomes a challenge for you when it comes to how to support them. That can sometimes be a Venus retrograde through the seventh house. But again, it doesn't have to be something super bad. It could also be like, oh, my partner's just, you know, feeling a little bit more introverted or going through a time where they're doing a lot of therapy or a lot of like childhood trauma examination, and maybe they're feeling really triggered and it's hard for me to know what they need. That could be a very real thing for the Aquarius risings. Now for the Pisces risings, Jupiter just moved into the third house of the neighborhood, the local community. You know, I can just see like the sort of Pisces risings just having a really good time, like this summer, like bopping around the local coffee shops, writing their book in the local library, like doing some community projects, even maybe some benefit coming through siblings. If you have siblings, maybe your sibling calls you and says like, oh, I'm having another baby, or your sibling says like, hey, like I have this free ticket to Florida that I'm not going to use. Why don't you take it? You know, there could be something along those lines. But overall, I think the third house is a very cerebral, mental house as well, and feels to me like it's a really good time to kind of sort of optimize our story and our narrative about ourselves and our lives. And if you've been wanting to implement sort of new mantras that are more positive, or new mantras that have to do with your healing journey, I think Jupiter moving into the third house is a really beautiful moment for that. Now, Venus retrograde is going to be squaring this from the sixth house of work and everyday life. So maybe there kind of develops some tension with, you know, your sort of job or your daily life at the office. Maybe you just are kind of finding things to be boring. That can kind of be Jupiter and Taurus in the third house. Like, wow, like my mind is expanding. Like I'm learning all this stuff. I just want to be a student, and my sort of day job just feels so boring, or like it doesn't feel like it's challenging me. So you may actually be looking for more of a challenge, more of a learning opportunity, Pisces rising. So wouldn't it be a bad idea to, you know, maybe take a class or do something that sort of challenges your mind in a really beneficial way while you're waiting for some of the work stuff to shift around? Because to be honest, it probably is going to take that full Venus retrograde for you to really make a decision, and you might not be finding that change coming in as fast as you want it to. So in the meantime, what can you do to really like sort of nurture that creative, sort of eager to learn inner child. I think that could be very Pisces rising. And lastly, we've got the Aries rising peeps. Jupiter recently moved into your second house of money, resources, how we value ourselves. So I actually think some Aries risings, like it could be a really good time to invest in a vision that you have. It could be a really good time to, kind of spend money to make money. Just make sure you're not overdoing it. Make sure you also have an accountant or a financial advisor to help you with some of those decisions. That would actually be the downside of Jupiter moving through the second house. It's sort of like an overspending kind of vibe. It almost reminds me of those stories or those statistics of like people winning the lottery. And if you look at those statistics, it's kind of mind-boggling to see how many of those people just completely run through their money, or they're back to a more impoverished state because I mean, obviously it has to do with trauma and generational poverty and things like that. But here's what I'm saying here, like, metaphorically, don't be the person who wins the lottery and spends all their money. We also see that with like really famous athletes, or recently there was a story about like a real housewife and her husband who got divorced because they overspent. Make sure you are approaching your spending with wisdom. And if you do this, Aries rising, your investments will pay off and your investments will be wise. But if you don't approach your spending with wisdom, and you instead overspend, then Jupiter may be more of a drain in the second house of resources than it is a benefit. And I think that relates to the square to Venus in the fifth house. And I'm just going to say it, Aries risings, no gambling during this summer. I don't know how many of y'all are big gamblers here, but like, I just see this, no trips to Las Vegas, please. Just kidding. But like, the fifth house is like fun and pleasure and hobbies and romance, and just be mindful of how much of your monetary resources are being budgeted towards those things, right? And one of a very valuable piece of financial advice that I was given once by an old boss, she told me, make sure you have a budget set aside that is like fun money, fun spending. Because if you don't, then you're gonna like overspend. It's almost like telling yourself like, don't eat that cake tonight that's in your fridge. And then instead of eating one slice, you eat the whole cake because you told yourself, don't eat it. Like it's like, no, allow yourself to spend a little bit so you don't overdo it later. But just give yourself a sort of boundary with that kind of thing so you're not overdoing it. Okay. But overall, Aries rising, I think it's a really cool summer to invest, especially if it's like a creative or an entrepreneurial endeavor. I'm kind of excited to see what you will create. Okay. That's about it, my friends. Those are my rising sign forecasts, my generalized rising sign forecast for Jupiter in Taurus. I would imagine, be releasing a Venus retrograde rising sign forecast video once Venus moves into Leo. So I think we'll be discussing these themes even more in depth in a later video. And again, if you want to help me out, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, like, leave a comment. If you're listening on the podcast, feel free to leave a review, a 5-star review. I haven't asked you guys to do that in a while. So if you're a new listener and you want to leave a 5-star review, that would really help me out. I think some Karen tanked my not tanked, but some Karen left me like a 1-star review on Apple Podcasts and was like complaining about me being like you basically complaining about me using gender inclusive language, and then left me a 1-star review, and I'm like, all right, I'm okay, bye. So please help me mitigate that Karen 1-star review on Apple Podcasts and leave me a 5-star review instead, right? And yeah, you guys are awesome. Thanks for being here. I really enjoy my little astrology tarot community, and I will see you in the next video.